Coming in at number 17 is the Montana Knife Company Stoned Goat 2.0. This is the version that is made of 52-100 steel. This type of steel was originally designed for ball bearings. It started to make its way into knives in around 1940. And this is a low alloy steel with elements of carbon and chromium. Now, from a toughness standpoint, it doesn't get much tougher. From a toughness rating, it was at 8.5. From a edge retention, it scored a 2, and from a corrosion resistance standpoint, it's a 0.5 point. So obviously, it's not a stainless steel knife, but it is very tough. Now, the total score there is 11 points. Let's talk about the parameters of this evaluation. So oftentimes, we're looking at knives and we're basing our decisions on the aesthetics or the price or a combination of both. But we don't really know a whole lot about the steel itself and the composition of that steel and what it means for us over the long term. How tough is that steel? How well does it hold an edge, or is it corrosion resistant? And so the objective of this evaluation is to look primarily at the steel through the lens of a few different brands of hunting knives. So this is a specs only evaluation, and we're just looking at the steel with each of these knives to get an understanding of what each type of steel offers. Some are more tough, some are more corrosion resistant, some are very balanced as it relates to the three aspects, some are not. And to be clear, there are other aspects of knives that are important outside of the steel. The heating and cooling process of the knife maker that they employ, the edge that they put, the edge geometry that they put on that blade, the Rockwell hardness that they target, whether it's high or low, can have an impact on that level of toughness. The blade thickness, the handle, as it relates to how it fits your hand. Some manufacturers will add a Serac coat or parkerize the blade to reduce corrosion resistance. And we're not going to evaluate all of those parameters in this video. We're again we just simply want to understand the steel within the framework of this group of hunting knives. Now, I am relying heavily on the work of Dr. Larrin Thomas. He has a PhD. He is an expert in this space. He's written a book called Knife Engineering. You can find on Amazon. Excellent book. He also runs knifesteelnerds.com. Also a great educational resource. And he's given me permission to share this data on this video. And so I want to thank Dr. Thomas, not only for those resources, but for the opportunity to share this content. So all steels are formed, but as all steels are formed, there are trade-offs. And I've heard the analogy of a three-legged stool as it relates to toughness, edge retention, and corrosion resistance. And so as one leg is lengthened, let's say toughness, corrosion resistance is reduced, or vice versa. As you increase corrosion resistance, often toughness is reduced. And as it relates to edge retention, if it has strong edge retention, it can be very difficult to sharpen. Or if you make something a very high Rockwell hardness, it can become very hard, but as a result, it can be less tough or more brittle. So there's a lot of trade-offs as it relates to knife making. And it's both really an art and a science. And again, I'm using this evaluation of 17 knives to really examine the steel that they are comprised of. As it relates to a particular knife that you're interested in, I would want to learn more about that respective knife maker, that manufacturer, to understand their process as it relates to this or that particular type of steel. So that's a very individual decision when it comes to choosing a knife. So I am looking at USA manufactured, USA made hunting knives. There's 1,000 knives that I didn't choose. So the knife I just shared is an outstanding knife, and the knives that I'm going to share are also amazing knives. They just have different properties. But I'm looking for fixed blade, I'm looking for something that's 3 to 4 inches in length from a blade standpoint. The closer to 2 ounces, the better. I want to use this for in-the-field processing of deer or elk. And so this is something I'm going to carry with me, but I'm not necessarily going to use all the time because it's going to be reserved for the processing of wild game. The primary metric is the overall score as it relates to those 3 categories: toughness, edge retention, and corrosion resistance. And you add those up for a total score, and that's how I force ranked these blades. Again, doesn't necessarily mean that number 17 is worse than number 1. It's just looking at those parameters and coming up with a total score. And it's an opportunity for you to determine, hey, I live in an area where I'm going to be using a blade that is going to be exposed to a lot of salt water, or maybe it's a very dry, arid area and you want something that's very tough. So I just want to make that clear. So I'm basing this evaluation on my needs and my opinions on some level. And if I've failed to rank your favorite knife or I've misquoted a number, I want to apologize in advance. I also want to make you aware of that I have a spreadsheet here that I've put all of this information on, and I want to make it available to you. If you go to Hunt Detail on Instagram, you can download this for free. And then you can correct my mistakes. You can add other knives for your or other steels for your own evaluation purposes. And I have a lot of other resources there that I think you might find useful, also available for free to download. So hope that's helpful. So let's move on to number 16. That's IronWill. It's the K1. This is an A2 tool steel. This was originally designed for industrial punches and dies, and it started to make its way into knives into the 1960s. And this is a high alloy steel, and it's 1% carbon, 5% chromium. So, and then there's some other alloys as well. This is a very tough steel, and from a scoring standpoint, toughness was a 6.5, edge retention was a 2.5, and corrosion resistance was a 3. So this knife is not stainless. I do know that they offer a Ceracoat or a coating on the blade to help reduce that risk of corrosion, but a fantastic steel and obviously very tough. Let's go on to number 15. This is from Knives of Alaska. This is the Trekker Elk Hunter. This is a D2 tool steel. Similarly, it was designed originally for industrial dies and cuttings, and it also made its way into knives around 1960, in the early 60s. This is a high alloy steel, and in this steel you see a pretty significant jump in the use of chromium. This is 1.5% carbon, 12% chromium, and then 1% vanadium, and then 1% molybdenum. It's a tough word to pronounce, and I probably won't say it again. So now as we move into our next 2 knives, you're going to see that these will be our first stainless steel knives that we add to that list, and this will be number 15 and number 14. And what makes a knife considered stainless is the range of chromium that's used. So chromium is added, and a portion of that chromium is dissolves into the solution and eventually turns into sort of a film on the top layer of the blade, and that increases its corrosion resistance. The problem with some of the stainless steel blades and that level of chromium is that a portion of that chromium is then goes and creates a carbide within the steel matrix. It combines with carbon and creates a very large carbide, and that carbide is problematic for the blade's toughness. So the larger the carbide, the more problematic it becomes for the blade's toughness. And so I want to use this as an example here. If this was the knife matrix, we were doing a close-up, and you see these larger pieces here within this mosaic. let's presume that these are the larger chromium carbides. And these carbides actually make the knife less tough. What we really want are very small, hard, evenly distributed carbides. And that can make the knife both tough, but also keep it from being brittle. And so that's one of the downfalls. As we move into the stainless steels, you will see the chromium increases to 13%, 14%, which makes it corrosion resistant, but unfortunately it impacts negatively the toughness. So this will be interesting as we move into number 14, which is from Benchmade. It's the mini tagged out, and this is 154 cm steel. Again, this was designed for industrial purposes, bearings in jet engines. This started to make its way into knives into roughly 1970, and this has 14% chromium. And again, let's take a look at these scores. From a toughness standpoint, it scored a 3.5. So we see a drop in that toughness. From an edge retention standpoint, it was a 4.5. And then from a corrosion resistance, it increases to a score of a 7 with a total score of 15. And so this is, again, a high alloy stainless, and also has 4% molybdenum. Again, tough to pronounce. So let's look at number 13. Again, this is another stainless. This is from Top Knives. This is the Shango XL, and this is made of 440C. This was originally designed for cutting tools, and it made its way into knives into around 1945. And this is a high alloy stainless, and this has 17% chromium. And so let's take a look at how this plays out. A 3.5 as it relates to toughness, a 4.5 as it relates to edge retention, and then as it relates to corrosion resistance, it does move up a 0.5 point to 7.5 over the Benchmade knife I mentioned earlier, with a total score of 15.5. And so now our next knife will have the acronym CPM in front of it. So let's talk about, what does that CPM mean? Well, sometime in the 70s, 1970s, Crucible Industries created their version of powder metallurgy. And if you think about the way that maybe older steels have been poured into an ingot to cool, when you pour in like a high alloy steel into an ingot to cool, what may happen is those components of that steel separate. Maybe there's more chromium over here, there's more carbon over here, maybe there's more nitrogen over here. And as a result, you have a knife that isn't really evenly distributed from a compound standpoint. And then you also have larger carbides. So what Crucible created was CPM. What it does, it more evenly distributes those carbides that I made reference to earlier. It creates a nice grain structure more evenly across the knife matrix. It actually reduces the size of these carbides, and it makes the knife more uniform. And so it creates it turns that alloy into a powder. And so anytime you see CPM in front of a knife, you can know that that was part of its development process, the powder metallurgy. Again, having difficulty with some of these words, but you get my point. And so the next knife that we have here coming in at number 12 is it's the Hogue Extrax. This is made out of CPM M4. This was designed for industrial high-speed tools in the early 2000s. And This is not a stainless steel. This is a high alloy speed steel because it was designed for speed tools in the industrial setting. Now, this is 1.4% carbon, 4% chromium, and then you start to see an increase of the presence of vanadium, and it's 5% vanadium. And vanadium, when it bonds with carbon, makes a much smaller carbide, as we talked to earlier, and smaller carbides are good, and so it makes the knife stronger. And so that's when you start. Let's see how that plays out as it relates to the presence of vanadium for this particular steel. So from a toughness standpoint, it scored a 6.5. From a edge retention standpoint, it scored a 6, and from a corrosion resistance, a 4. So really balanced as it relates to what we've covered so far, with a total score of 16.5. So looks like a great option if you're looking for balance from that type of blade or that type of knife from Hogue. Now let's move up to number 11. This is actually going to be the Benchmark Steep Country. This is another CPM steel. This is CPM S30V. This was designed for high-end cutlery, is my understanding. So here we have the first time you have a steel designed for knife use. This, I believe, came out in 2002. And this is the... again, a high alloy steel. This is a stainless steel, high oil alloy stainless steel with 1.5% carbon, 14% chromium, and then you have 4% vanadium. And from a toughness standpoint, it comes in at a 3.5. From an edge retention, it scores a 6, and from a corrosion resistance standpoint, it scores a 7.5. So again, you see that increase in chromium, you see a drop in toughness, you see an increase in stainless steel, stain resistance or corrosion resistance, and it scored a total of 17 points. So really great looking knife and great looking option. Let's move up to number 10. This is the Benchmade Tagged Out, and this is another CPM steel S45VN. This is also stainless, and this was came out in 2019 and was considered an enhancement over S30V and S35VN, which we'll talk about more as we move forward as it relates to S35VN. This is 1.48% carbon and 16% chromium, as well as 3% vanadium. And so the scores here from a toughness standpoint are 4, edge retention is a 5.5, and corrosion resistance is an 8 for a total score of 17.5. Coming in at number 9 is the Benchmade Tagged Out, and this particular steel is Elmax. And this is a different version of the Tagged Out from Benchmade, but the steel is different, and this is a high alloy stainless with carbon, 18% chromium, and then 3% vanadium. And the purpose of this was this steel was designed for high-tech applications, circuits, connectors, and switches, and it scored a 4 for toughness, a 5.5 for edge retention, and an 8 for corrosion resistance. So we're moving up the ladder a little bit. This is also scored a 17.5 total score. But again, it's a powdered steel. It's a very interesting combination of alloys. Let's move into number 8, which is the Argali Serac. This is CPM S30VN. Now this came out in 2009, and it was designed for high-end knives, cutting tools, and it was considered to be an upgrade over S30V, which we talked about earlier. This is a high alloy stainless, and has 14% chromium, 4% vanadium, 1.4% carbon, and you're going to see a little bit more balance here. It scored a 5 as it relates to toughness, a 5 as it relates to edge retention, and a 7.5 as it relates to corrosion resistance. So for a total score of 17.5. Great balance. Obviously a great knife and a great option. Coming in at number 7 is from Shield Knife and Tool. It's called the Mission. This is made out of CPM 3V, and this is a high performance tool steel. It came out in the late 90s when it started to see, or at least when it started to see adoption in the knife industry, about the late 1990s. This is a non-stainless steel. So you have 0.8% carbon, 7.5% chromium, 2.75% vanadium. And from a scoring standpoint, it scored very high from a toughness at 8.5, the edge retention at 4.5, and the corrosion resistance at 5.5, for a total score of 18.5 for the Shield Knife and Tool, the Mission. Coming in at number 6 is from Benchmade. This is the Raghorn carbon fiber, and this is made out of CPM Cruwear. Now, this type of tool, this was considered to be an upgrade over the A2 and the D2 tool steel. This is not a stainless steel, and it's it's carbon, 7.5% chromium, 1.6% molybdenum, 2.5% vanadium, and then the addition of tungsten. So let's see how this plays out as it relates to toughness. It scored an 8. As it relates to edge retention, it scored a 5, and then as it relates to corrosion resistance, it was 5.5, for a total score of 18.5 for that Benchmade Raghorn carbon fiber. And very great looking knife, lightweight, obviously very, very tough. A little bit on the expensive side, I believe. I think it's an over a $400 knife. Now, coming in at number 5, we have the Benchmade Narrows Titanium. This is made out of M390 stainless steel. That steel was, came out in the early 2000s, originally for molds and dies. It is a high alloy stainless steel. And this is really interesting. Now we're at 20% chromium, 1.9% carbon, and then traces of tungsten, vanadium, and molybdenum. And so from a toughness standpoint, it scores 3.5. From edge retention, it scores a 6.5. And from a corrosion resistance, it scores a 9. And that's the highest that we've seen from a stainless steel knife from a corrosion resistance so far. And obviously you see that play out with, as a function of that high chromium level. Moving on to number 4 is the Bonds Creek Nomad. Now this is made out of AEB-L stainless steel. This was originally designed for razor blades. It's a high alloy stainless steel, and it is a little bit of carbon and a lot of chromium, 13% chromium. It's let's take a look here. It looks like it scores a 9.5 in terms of toughness, a 3 in terms of edge retention, and a 7 in terms of corrosion resistance. And at $100, this is, a really interesting option for a total score of 19.5. And so that's a really good option to consider. It's not the most aesthetically prettiest knife, but it might be something to check out if you're looking for a knife made of this type of steel with these types of properties. Coming in at number 3 is the Benchmade Altitude carbon fiber. Now this is made out of CPM S90V. That type of steel started to show itself in knives in the early 2000s, I believe. It was designed for industrial extrusion, feed, and screws, and it came out of used in the plastics industry. And it's 2.3% carbon, 14% chromium, 9% vanadium. So you see that increase in vanadium, and from a toughness standpoint, it scored a 3.5. From a edge retention standpoint, it scored a 9, and from a corrosion resistance, it scored a 7.5. So interesting knife, interesting option if you're looking for something that holds an edge for a long time. I can imagine if I'm in the backcountry, I don't want to deal with sharpening it. I can take this blade and be pretty comfortable that it's going to hold an edge for a long time. Now, again, as I mentioned before, the better the edge retention, the harder it is to sharpen once it loses that edge. So keep that in mind. But moving on to number 2, this is from Off-Grid Knives. This is the Polaris XL. This is comprised of Vanax Super Clean steel. Now, it was evolved to be knife specific, at least that's my understanding. I think it got into knives in around 2017, and it's a little bit of carbon, 18.2% chromium, and then some vanadium, as well as some other alloys. And from a toughness standpoint, it scores a 5. From a edge retention, it scores a 5.5. And then from a corrosion resistance standpoint, it scores a perfect 10. And so that total score is 20.5. And so you have a great knife if you're going to be using it a lot in Alaska or saltwater applications. This would probably be something I would look for because of the exposure to salt and constant water, that sort of thing. So let's move on to number 1. And I want to point out that we've been looking at different stainless steel knives over the course of this exercise, and we've seen the chromium shoot up, and it has an impact on corrosion resistance, but it's also had an impact on the level of toughness of these blades that are stainless steel or corrosion resistant. And so what's interesting here is a steel that was designed specifically for knives. And I will say that it was designed by Dr. Larrin Thomas, who I referenced earlier. And what Dr. Thomas did here was that he pulled back the level of chromium to, I believe, 10.7%, and added niobium, nitrogen. Of course, it has vanadium. It has the one that I can't pronounce, the molybdenum. And the reason it seems that Dr. Thomas did this is because he wanted to reduce the number of large chromium carbides that exist in the knife matrix. And so by pulling it down to 10.7%, what it looks like he did was maintain the high level, almost the highest level of corrosion resistance, but also increase that toughness. So where you have the chromium, just the perfect amount of chromium to go into the knife matrix and create that film, that corrosive resistant film, but not create large brittle carbides that negatively impact toughness. And so this steel came out in about 2021-ish. And the number 1 knife is the Montana Knife Company Stoned Goat 2.0 MagnaCut. The first one I mentioned was made out of 52-100 steel. This is MagnaCut. And I've shared with you already some of the dynamics of the steel. Let's talk about the scores. From a toughness standpoint, this is a stainless steel. It scores a 7. From an edge retention standpoint, it scores a 5, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And from a corrosion resistance, it scores a 9.5. And so here what you have is an incredibly balanced steel, stainless steel, that hasn't really usually existed, and it doesn't seem to have existed in some of the steels that we've covered so far, with a total score of 21.5. And so high alloy stainless steel, lots of balance there. Now, I do want to point out that Montana Knife Company is not the only company that has a MagnaCut steel knife of this nature. Argali has one, Benchmade, Gerber Gear, Buck Knives as well. So I want to point that out. In all of these knives that I listed and all of the manufacturers, I'm going to have a link for every one of these manufacturers so you can go to their website, look at their selection. Some of these knives that I've mentioned, that some of these particular brands, they have other versions or other iterations in MagnaCut or another type of steel if you're interested in. So I encourage you to go to the manufacturer's website, look at what they offer in terms of warranty, what they talk about as it relates to their Rockwell hardness. Ask them questions about the edge geometry, but learn about their process. But I chose the Montana Knife Company Stoned Goat 2.0 because it fits the bill for all of the things that I outlined. Plus, they are solely dedicated to making knives. They're not just a sort of an outdoor company, and knives is a part of what they do. It's the only thing they do. So I hope that this has been helpful. Thank you so much for your time. Please download the spreadsheet at Hunt Detail on Instagram. And best of luck this upcoming season.